the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm now joined by old friend Nick Cellini of 680, the Fan, who has just really enjoyed just the daily grind of Atlanta Braves baseball, where everything is great. Nick Cellini, how are you, sir?
I'm doing a lot better right now, Chase, than seemingly the Braves are, but I'm still supporting the club. I'm a season ticket holder, so we have to take the good with the bad, right?
So you being a season ticket holder, going to a lot of games, do you get stopped a lot? Is it one of those things where do you want to have those conversations? How are you in public when people want to talk about Braves? Because I think with you and I in sports media, we talk about it a lot and we kind of want a break from it. Do you embrace it? Do you like it? Or do you kind of wish you could just kind of be low key and not really have the conversations there?
Well, listen, Chase, I'm lucky everybody takes the time to say hello. That means they're listening to the show. That means they kind of sort of care about what I think about the Braves. I'm like my wife. She's just like, you know what? You get 3 hours of them a day. I get them 24/7. So he is all yours. But in all seriousness, I do appreciate the fact that people are passionate about the Braves. The people are passionate about sports in this town because it's really changed. I've been here since 1996. And even when I first moved down here, the passion wasn't really what it was and what maybe it should have been as a pro sports town as opposed to what you see now. I think for all the teams, especially the Falcons and the Braves and even the Hawks. I mean, people get upset with maybe some of the things the Hawks aren't doing. I know I'm going off topic a little bit, but at least they care as opposed to being apathetic, which was, I think, the case in the late 90s.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get into some Falcons and Braves stuff here in just a second, but I kind of wanted to pick your brain on something that I'm curious about the origin and what you look at it as with Crosstalk with you, Chris, Matt, and Chuck, where this is now just an everyday thing. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, Nick, I think it's the best. It's not a show. It's the best. I don't know. It's the best 45 minutes on the radio each day. And I'm curious, do you agree? And then what was the origin of the Crosstalk with you, Matt, Chuck, and Chris?
Well, our boss, and thank you for that, because a lot of people do feel the same way. Our boss, our program director, Matt Egger, said, I want to kind of put these two shows together and we'll have kind of like that 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes longer period where you guys can just kind of, you have a couple of things sports wise, and then we go back in time and talk about birthdays, what have you, things that happen on this date in history. But want to put those two shows together and kind of see where it goes. I liken it to, I don't know if you've ever listened to Howard Stern, but when he was Howard Stern in his day, they would do the news at the end of the day every day, and Robin would do the news, but they would go off in seemingly 1,000 different directions and go off on a million tangents, and they didn't know where we were going to go. And it's kind of the same way. We don't know where we're going to go, and the audience doesn't know where we're going to go. And it seems to be a fun ride, Chase, because a lot of people do really seem to enjoy that 20 to 30 minutes at the end of the show every day.
It's just good. I think part of it is like the blend of, it kind of feels like a podcast is the way I would describe it, because there's a blend over where it just feels like four guys who know each other really well are just talking about life and what's going on in the world. Like it's hard to replicate elsewhere in radio. It's just a different kind of feel. And I think that's why, in my estimation, I'm curious if the listeners feel the same, but it just feels like it doesn't feel like the mics are on a little bit. I understand there are different things, but it just feels like four guys catching up on what's going on around Atlanta or back in time and things like that.
Yeah, and that's the culmination of guys, you're right, Chase, that have known each other, which is kind of frightening because I'm not getting any younger, for almost 30 years. So we kind of where we're going to go. We almost finish each other's sentences. So yeah, it's fun. I mean, we just get, it's the end of the show for us, and we're just, Chris and I are kind of goofy at that point from being on the air for, plus hours, and they're just kind of getting warmed up. So it's a good combination. And like I said, sometimes we'll go off on a serious tangent, but more often than not, we go off on the deep end when it comes to pop culture.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't a sports radio thing at 680 question for you, Nick, but you're a workout guy. You're an exercise enthusiast. You said you're getting up there in age. I'm curious from your perspective, and I think listeners are curious about this. What is the hardest exercise for you to do that you still are committed to, that you're like, ooh, Father Time's catching up to me a little bit here?
There is nothing worse than a leg workout, lunges, squats. Those are the two things. When I know it's leg day, I dread it, but for some strange reason, I'm going to push myself through it because I know that works your core. I don't want to get too deep into, the exercise end of things and bore people, but yeah, the certain things like even bench presses, I got a bad shoulder. So throwing the heavy weight around, that's a thing of the past. It's reps, reps, reps now, and just trying to burn fat. But yeah, leg days, every Monday's leg day, and I dread
Okay.
day with a passion.
Are you a believer in first thing in the morning, the lunch workout, the evening workout? What do you subscribe to?
I kind of like to mix it up because I think you shock your
Hmm.
body a little bit. Sometimes I like to go after the show. Sometimes I'll go before the show. So, it varies, but it's hard getting up in the morning. But I'll tell you, you feel better when I'm done with my workout in the morning and I'm driving in to work. It's a
Mhm.
different feeling as opposed to, knowing you have to do it after the show. But I think I just like to mix it up just to, like I said, so my body doesn't get used to it.
What do you think you're a lot better at in sports radio now versus where you were maybe even 20, 30 years ago? What do you think you've improved on the most if you look back and listen to yourself 20, 30 years ago? What do you think you feel like you've mastered and developed the most?
I think now, which is crazy to say because I never thought I would be this way, I think now I control my emotions. I don't take things like
Hmm.
if the Braves are on a losing streak like this, you can't go crazy. If the Falcons are
Mhm.
losing, you can't come in screaming every day. You have to kind of try to see the big picture. Now, again, as sports fans, it's a challenge to do, but I think keeping my cool about me is the thing that I think I've gotten better at over the years. Just trying to stay on an even keel. Every once in a while, I'm gonna fly off handle, but not as much as I used to, which again is a good thing. And a lot of people who listen to me 20 years ago will tell you there was no place to go but up in that regard.
Is that intentional or is it just aging?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I
Mm.
try to, gauge where the audience is and gauge where I'm at because you can't scream every day. If you scream every day,
Yeah.
it's going to be like, okay, it's just an act now. If you're not passionate about it, people are smart. They read right through
Mm.
those. And if you come in doing that every day, then it's a circus, and no one wants it to be a circus any more than sports talk radio already is.
Well, it feels like I don't know if you'll give him the credit, but Domino being kind of laid back in that way. Do you think that's had an effect? Just talking to somebody with that kind of demeanor every day for many years too might play into it a little bit?
Yeah, I think we still kind of take our veiled shots at one another in
Yeah.
good spirit because, like I said, we've worked together for almost 30 years. We
Mm.
can say anything to one another, and neither one of us is going to be offended. But yeah, being around him and him seeing the big picture, has certainly rubbed off on me, whether I realize that or not over the years. Just trying to see, just trying to think two steps ahead. Like even now with the Braves, it's like okay, as we're taping this podcast, they were supposed to play a doubleheader against the
Mm.
Reds. First game was terrible. Got rained out in the second game. I said it on social media today. This, when you look at this lineup today, it was an expansion lineup in that 9-4
Yeah.
loss. Big picture, Alex Anthopoulos told the season ticket holders yesterday they are buyers. They're not going to be sellers. So they're going to have to adjust something. And Michael Harris hopefully gets back in mid-August, and Max Fried gets healthy because I think they even understand with what they have right now, they're not going to win. So instead of losing my mind about it, we try to think big picture and say, okay, let's see where this team is on July the 30th when the trade deadline comes and goes.
So if you were Alex Anthopoulos at this moment, because it seems like you might go the other way, would you be a seller at this? Because people think tear down, but seller can just be trading Max Fried and just riding out the rest of it. Like it could just be something that's similar. Like that's how we looked at it with the Hawks. And one of the more frustrating things with the Hawks was just sitting on Kevin Herter for too long and then losing him for nothing, basically sitting on for John Collins too long. There's nothing wrong with just like selling high in a little way where you just look at it, you're like, the odds just aren't great. But then you look at the rest of the NL and you're like, if we do a little, I mean, obviously the Phillies are the juggernaut, but we'll see. You might miss the Phillies depending on how the seating unfolds. They might get upset by somebody else. And I mean, the Diamondbacks, they weren't feeling like they were a World Series team at this time last year. And baseball is just a little bit different in that regard, where here, me being a Tennessee guy, like one of the things that was kind of crazy is the best team Tennessee's had ever, and maybe the best college baseball team of all time in 2022, didn't make it to Omaha. They got upset in the supers. And then, of course, the next year where they have all these problems all year long, the offense wasn't nearly the same, and they made it to Omaha. They made a deep run. Obviously, they won it all this year, but that's probably the most frustrating thing about baseball. And maybe that's where AA looks at this is like, I understand fans are frustrated. I understand that the injury bug has hit us really hard, but come playoff time, like it's going to get weird. There's an opportunity for us, and it's better to be in that party and see what happens versus just going too much the other way and going super cynical. I don't know. That's just my read. Is that your read too?
Yeah, I think you have to look at, like you said, Chase, the two World Series teams last year.
Mm,
Texas, I mean, they closed out the season on a horrific run. The Diamondbacks, you talked about them. I don't know how they did what they did winning those last two games in Philadelphia. The Braves in 21, and even, the opposite, the Braves the last two postseasons coming apart at the seams, despite all of the records, especially that they set last year. Are you peaking at the right time? And if your staff is healthy, if you have your top three in Sale and Lopez and Fried, then you kind of like your chances. But if they have to do something with this lineup right now, because your corner outfielders aren't even hitting 200. And I'm sorry, I'll never forget 21, and I appreciate Adam Duvall for that. But I mean, defensively, offensively, he's a major liability now. And I've said this on social media a few times as well. Either he has an injury that we don't know about, that no one's revealing, or the end is just here for Adam Duvall, because he's clearly not the same player, nowhere near the same player he once was. So in the outfield, you got to make some moves. You just have to.
What would you think the reception would be from the fan base? Like if you took calls the day after Double H, let's say he trades Max Fried and maybe, I don't know, Travis d'Arnaud. What do you think the reaction would be? Because one of the interesting things about the Braves is obviously they've been the most stable organization in Atlanta for many years. It's just normal that they're competing year over year. This year, it certainly seems like, at least from the outside and talking to my friends and just monitoring social media, that most Braves fans are ready to hit the eject button. I think their Double A actually has the goodwill of the fans. My interpretation would be, if he sold, this might be one of the rare occurrences this summer where I think fans would not be mad at the Braves just being like, it's not our year. Do you feel the same?
I may steal that from you, Chase. I may put that
Okay.
out on media, and we may take some calls. If the Braves are sellers, how would you
Mhm.
feel this year? It's a good question, because obviously when you're losing and social media, there's a lot of negativity anyway on social media. But going back to what you said, I think a lot of people would feel that it's the right thing to do. And Home Team Brandon Leak, who does the locker room 6 to 10 weekdays, the morning show on the Fan, he kind of brought it up for the first time. What about trading Max Fried? The issue we have now is the injury. Is he
Mhm.
healthy? Is someone going to be, and all it takes is one team. Would somebody be willing to roll the dice that Max Fried is going to come back healthy? Because I think you can get from a team like, I don't know, the Yankees, even the Dodgers, where I think he's going to sign anyway
Yeah.
here, because they're going to be the ones to offer him all the money. I mean, can you get something in return? If you can, maybe you start to think about replenishing the minor league system, which obviously with all the deals you've made over the years isn't quite the same. So it's something to think about.
Or Reynaldo Lopez. Like, are you sure? Are you convinced that this is the real Reynaldo Lopez for the next 2 to 3 years? Like, this might be the all-time best time to trade somebody like Reynaldo.
Yeah, it's a good point, especially when you look at his last two starts. Now, again, there was going to be a market correction. He
Yeah.
wasn't that good, but you're right. The past 3 or 4 years, he never threw them more than 66 or some odd innings, and somewhere along those lines. So, yeah, I mean, can he be a guy that's going to give you 150, 200 innings every year? It's a valid question. Do you think that this is as good as it's going to get, and maybe you can get something for him now that you won't in the future? All valid questions that probably Alex Anthopoulos is behind the scenes bouncing around right now, thinking about in his head.
Final thing on the Braves. I think this season, one of the weirdest parts about it is just that the lineup has had so many problems. Like, everyone's focusing on the injuries a little bit, but the lineup, it's like Ozzy was, I mean, it hurts that Ozzy's going to be gone for a while, heart and soul of the team, but he's had a rough year by and large. I mean, Ronald Acuna was average before he was knocked out for the year. You look at Matt Olson is having just a brutal season on his end. Austin Riley, slow start. Who, in your estimation, though, is the most surprising just season long slump in the lineup? Who is just, you just see every night, you're like, I just cannot believe he's having this kind of year?
Well, it's got to be a guy that was a streak hitter as it was, but to be 1 for 33 going into Wednesday afternoon's game in Matt Olson. I mean, I watched an at bat he had Saturday in the second game of the doubleheader when he struck out late in that game. And he had it written all over his face, his body language. He strikes out during that at bat. He looked completely lost up there. So he's the guy. I am
Mm.
shocked. Sean Murphy, too. I know Sean Murphy got hurt, but Sean Murphy clearly isn't the same player either. The two All-Stars from Oakland are the two biggest surprises at this point. And Matt Olson, people say bench him, but okay, you bench him. What are you supposed to do? Play Adam Duvall at first base? We've talked about him. Do you put a first baseman's glove on Marcell Ozuna? I don't think anybody wants that either. So you're kind of between a rock and a hard place with Matt Olson right now. He's got to play. Maybe you give him a day off here and there because he did play he's played 559 or so consecutive games now, which is the longest in baseball. But you give him an occasional day off. Other than that, he's still going to be your first baseman.
Yeah, and it's just the confidence level there. Like, that's not something you want to do in this kind of streak. I mean, he's a long-term guy. Like, you just have to let him get through it. I mean, you hope it's not a Chris Davis situation. Like, that's the worst case scenario, is like something like that. Then you're in, I mean, we're not there yet, but that's something I'm sure some fans have in the back of their minds. Like, I hope it doesn't go, but I don't see that in the future for Matt Olson. But you just have to, like, he's a core guy. You have to let him work through this.
Yeah, there's nothing else they can do at that point. As you said, they signed him to that contract. He's the core guy, and he hopefully will turn things around. Like I said, he's a streak hitter. Maybe late in the season, he gets hot again and carries this team on a postseason run. Who's to say?
Switching gears here a little bit to the Falcons. They've had 6 consecutive losing seasons, obviously, Nick. What makes you feel most confident, though, that the streak ends this season?
Well, they have a quarterback. I mean, let's face it. And Mariota and Ritter and, Taylor Heineke is a backup quarterback. But the guys that were the full-time starters obviously were not professional quarterbacks as far as starters are concerned. Now they have a guy that is all of that and then some. And you've heard all of the players, Kyle Pitts and Drake London, Bijan, they've all rallied around him, the offensive linemen. They've all rallied around Kirk Cousins. And you just could see the optimism that is there now. So for that reason, I think having an offense, I still got questions about the defense, but the fact that they have a quarterback now, I see them winning this division. I would not be surprised to see them win 9, maybe get lucky and win 10 games. But I think the over-under is 9.5. I would go under that as far as Vegas is concerned, but I could see them winning 9 games and winning this division because I don't trust anybody else in this NFC South.
It's just funny because I feel like I felt like that the last couple of years, right? Even with worse quarterback play. And that's why it just, everything screams the Falcons should run away with this, but I can't do it. Like, there's still just some part of me that's like, I think I'm going to pick the Bucks again. The Bucks are just like, Baker's just going to quietly get his team to 9-8, 10-7, or I don't know. Like, we have to see what Kirk Cousins looks like. That's part of the problem. It's not a fun answer of just what does Kirk Cousins look like post Achilles. Like, we just don't know. With his age, there also has to be a reason that the Falcons draft Michael Penix. Like, there is some level of concern within that building of like what Kirk Cousins is like. Like, yeah, you pay him. It's kind of like, hey, we're not sure about Kirk, but we are sure that either Kirk or Michael Penix is going to work here. Like, we're sure when we throw these 2 darts, one of these 2 is going to hit this year or next year, and we're going to be fine for the foreseeable future. But that goes to my next question of like, do you believe, because this is a rarity, like you don't see guys being able to sit behind first round quarterbacks, top 10 quarterbacks, sit and learn for years like that. What the Packers have done, what the Chiefs do with Mahomes, that's a rarity in this league. Do you actually believe Michael Penix, who is one of the older quarterbacks coming into to the NFL and with his injury history, do you actually believe we don't see him at all this year, or do you think Michael Penix Jr. does get some starts for the Atlanta Falcons?
When they drafted him, I said this: you're inviting trouble. Even if, let's say, Kirk Cousins doesn't play in the preseason and Michael Penix does, which he should, as well, you're going to have questions. Kirk Cousins, because every NFL quarterback for the most part goes through a rough stretch. If he hits a rough 2 or 3 or 4 game stretch during the regular season, you're going to hear the other side of the fan base say, hey, look, what about the guy you just drafted? No, it doesn't happen very often. And that's why you're starting to hear now. The assumption was when they first drafted Michael Penix Jr., it was going to be 2 years for Kirk Cousins and then Penix would take over. Now you're starting to hear maybe one and done with Kirk Cousins and then Michael Penix coming in and playing. And the only time I recall a team having the ultimate postseason success and then switching quarterbacks was the Ravens, who were, of course, led by their defense when Trent Dilfer and then Elvis Gerbach came in when he was signed by Brian Billick. Yeah, it's a rarity chase for a number of different reasons, but for the most part, to start the season, it's going to be Kirk Cousins, and you hope that he's healthy with the Achilles. But beyond this year, who's to say? And like I said, if there's a rough patch, who's to say we don't see Michael Penix? Because everybody's trying to say, well, no matter what, Taylor Heineke is going to be the backup. I don't know about that. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I have my doubts on that one. I think if Taylor Heineke is going in the game, if Kirk Cousins gets hurt or is not playing well, Falcons have bigger problems. The Falcons they're in a lot of trouble in that regard because Penix just being the older quarterback and being that kind of Stafford lefty type that Raheem Morris obviously knows very well back in Los Angeles. I don't know. My gut just says they're not going to break the norm. Like, I think we see Penix. Like, do you think right now it's July 24th, Penix starts at least one game for the Falcons? What do you think?
Boy,
I think yes.
What are the odds? The over-under is a half a game for Michael
Yeah.
Penix. Yeah, quarterbacks drop. Quarterbacks get hurt all the time in the NFL. So
especially last year.
Yes, they get hurt every year. We know what happened with Cousins last year. No quarterback, for the most part, plays all 17 games. It's still strange for 17 games. But
we're about to go to 18, so we're not going to get. We don't need to be that comfortable with it yet.
Yeah, I think he will start a game this year for reasons, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think so too. It's too long. I think there is real injury concerns. I think it's a good story, but I think this kind of threading the needle, we're like, we'll just have Kirk for 2 years and he'll be fine, and then we'll just go to Penix, and it's like that's what happens to the Chiefs and the Packers, who win Super Bowls back in the 60s. Like, that's not the Falcons. We all know it's not going to go that way. It's not going to be this clean, nice transition of power. That's not how this is going to go in Atlanta. There's no way.
It's always something with the Falcons, isn't it?
Yeah,
and that would be something once again.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, what can the good folks check out from you over at 680 The Fan this week?
Well, obviously, we are back tomorrow. We'll talk more about what's going on with the Braves, and the Falcons are in training camp. I think we're going to be up at Lake Point as well. There's a big baseball tournament with prospects going on up there, so we'll certainly be there talking to some people. And I think we'll be at Lake Point. I think we're there on Friday as well. There's this big GON outdoor blast going on. You know me, I'm a big outdoorsman. Said no one ever. We're going to be there on Friday as well. But certainly, we'll be talking about the plight of the Braves. And I may steal, and I'll credit you, of course, but I may steal questions that you asked about Michael Penix. And then, how would you react if you're a Braves fan and the Braves turned out to be sellers? Very, very good content you've provided for me, Chase. So I thank you for that.
Absolutely. We're all on the same team here. We're all on the same team. Nick Cellini, thank you so much for making the time today. I greatly appreciate it. And we'll have to check back in again soon.
I am here anytime you need me, Chase. Thank you.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.